Hi, it's Kiffin LeBates here, and I got an email the other day from someone called Ron asking me if I could make a video talking about how a nation state or a very wealthy malicious actor could somehow bring down Bitcoin from a technical point of view. And to start with, there's actually a very good short clip of Andreas Antonopoulos talking about this very problem, and I'll make sure I put a link to that in the description of this video. But to start with, let's look at what kind of technical approaches could be taken to try to bring down Bitcoin. And the first and most obvious one that everyone thinks of is mounting a 51% attack. So that's the situation where somebody manages to corner the network hashing market effectively by buying lots and lots of mining equipment, and once they have more than 50% of the hashing power, the way the network works is that that person can secretly mine a fork of the chain and then reveal it, and that fork will then become the canonical chain for the blockchain, and the transactions that were in the other fork that everybody thought were real and verified and true would no longer be valid. So this then allows the attacker to mount something called a double spend attack, where they spend Bitcoin on one chain and then reverse the spend on the new fork that takes over because of the amount of hashing power they have. Now, there are a number of problems with this, which Andreas summarizes really neatly and rather humorously in his video. But the summary is, firstly, the hashing power of the network last time I checked was about 160 million terahashes, and it costs about $30 per terahash to buy mining equipment. So the attacker would have to buy about $5 billion worth of mining equipment, and then they would have to spend about $5 million a day on the electricity. And all this would allow them to do is mount this double spend attack, and it would then immediately become obvious that they'd done that, and the community could decide to ignore that fork, put something in the code that says skip that fork, go back to the one that we were using before. And yes, they could be annoying, they can swap internet addresses and so on and so forth and keep popping up and hampering the network, but it's a lot of money to spend, it requires a lot of organization, and it can't be done in stealth mode. And the thing is, if you want to bring down Bitcoin, you're going to have to kind of do it from within in a way that isn't obvious to the community but sows fear and panic as to the reliability of the system. So the 51% attack, not a good approach. The next obvious thing might be, can you corner the Bitcoin market? And the problem there is that the current market cap of Bitcoin is in the region of the GDP of the Netherlands or 5% of the US GDP. So let's say the US government decided that what they wanted to do was buy up all the Bitcoins and then freeze them so that there's no transactions going on anymore. Well, the problem there is, firstly, 5% of your GDP is a lot of money to spend on trying to cripple one single cryptocurrency. And secondly, of course, as they start buying it, the price will go up. So they're not going to get it for that $1 trillion sum. They'll actually inflate the cost of Bitcoin. So again, probably not a very feasible attack, and certainly an awful lot of resources for a nation to spend on trying to disable one single cryptocurrency. So I can't see that working either. Then another approach would be to try and find flaws in the system. So they could hire a team of crack cryptography researchers and get them digging into, is there a flaw in SHA-256 which would mess up mining, or is there a flaw in ECDSA, the signing algorithm, that would allow them to arbitrarily spend Bitcoins that other people owned. Again, there are a number of problems with this. Firstly, do those flaws actually exist? And secondly, if they do exist and the government then starts exploiting them, that's not just going to impact Bitcoin, that's going to impact the financial system as a whole, because our financial services use asymmetric key cryptography and other cryptographic concepts in order to allow us to conduct secure financial transactions. So they wouldn't just bring Bitcoin down, they could actually bring down the whole financial system, which presumably is not what they want. Then people talk about quantum computing being something that could crack the existing cryptographic systems that are used in, for example, Bitcoin. Now, I'm sure that will happen at some point. However, this is already being taken into account by the Bitcoin community in that there are digital signing algorithms that are quantum resistant, and the system could be moved over to those if it becomes apparent that quantum cryptography is on the verge of breaking existing systems. So that would leave people who had Bitcoins in old addresses in a bit of a quandary, because you'd have to move them over to the new form of accounts. But it's not the end of the world. The system can evolve to cope with these kind of developments in technology. If the malicious attacker managed to build a quantum computer that could crack the various algorithms and kept it secret, then they could sow some fear and panic by having the occasional transaction cropping up that people said, well, I didn't actually do that. And in fact, it's this fear and doubt that is probably the best approach to bring down the Bitcoin network, which leads me on to another approach that could be considered, namely, could the attacker get insiders into, for example, the Bitcoin core developers team and start putting code into the Bitcoin code base that they know is exploitable, and then use it to produce all sorts of transactions that reduce the confidence that people have in the Bitcoin network. And again, it's a bit of a gamble. It does seem technically feasible to me, but it's not guaranteed. It would certainly have to be a long strategy, and eventually those people would be exposed, because there are lots of eyeballs looking at the code because it's open source and publicly available. And as Linus Torvalds, the inventor of Linux, said, given enough eyeballs, eventually all bugs are shallow. So once it was revealed that a certain number of people were actually plants, then they would be expelled, their rights to put code into the code base would be removed, and their changes could be reverted. So it could cause momentary panic, and that certainly causes the price of Bitcoin to wildly fluctuate. We've seen before that all sorts of massive swings in price happen when fairly minor events occur. But again, it's not something that the community and the code can't eventually recover from. So what other approaches are there? Well, you could try and mount a media campaign to again sow fear and doubt, but we're sort of seeing that already. There are plenty of prominent figures rubbishing cryptocurrency, or saying that it's damaging to the environment, that it's a tool for criminals, that it encourages money laundering and so on and so forth. And again, that doesn't really seem to be bothering anybody. And yes, Bitcoin can be used to conduct illegal financial transactions, but that is the case for every single currency on the planet. If you have a means of exchange, then that means of exchange will also be used by people to conduct transactions that the authorities or the community doesn't approve of. That's kind of unavoidable when it comes to transacting systems. Then another approach could be to just ban it. Now, we've seen countries like Russia and India try this, and I've done videos previously on how bizarre it is to try and ban people from knowing a secret number. I mean, that's a kind of thought control, and in any democratic, open and free society, that's something that's very, very hard to swing. So again, banning it, it could make it awkward to use, it could delay the uptake, but it's not going to crush it away once and for all. Another approach that could be taken is to try to make the community divisive. So again, bring in agents to sow fear, uncertainty and doubt, and disagree with stuff, and so on and so forth. But we've actually already seen this in the Bitcoin world. We've ended up with the Bitcoin Cash and then the Bitcoin SV forks. And again, that hasn't actually hampered Bitcoin in the slightest. It makes for amusing stories in the news, but Bitcoin keeps chugging along anyway. And this is the problem that a malicious attacker or a nation state that wants to get rid of it has, is that it's a distributed, decentralized system. And so there is no single point of attack. You can try and hamper it in different ways, but ultimately it's so spread out and so diverse that you'd need some kind of coordinated action from all the nation states to try and bring it down. I can't see how a single agency could actually destroy something that doesn't have a head for you to cut off, as it were. Did I think of any other things? I think that was the list I came up with. I'm not saying that it's impossible to crush Bitcoin, but if it is, it's going to be something pretty clever and well thought out if it's going to succeed. There's no obvious attack point, as I said. So I hope that answers your question, Ron, and that you found it interesting, and I hope the rest of you found it interesting too. I'll see you all in the next video soon. Bye for now.